Senses of Detriment is the latest EP from Atlanta, Georgia-based death metal trio Cemetery Filth, and they've always been death metal, a pure death metal band, definitely influenced by Autopsy and Morbid Angel and Death to start, a classic death metal band by anyone's measure, and one that has always focused on riffs first and a lot of energy in a live setting. Now, they've had a lot of lineup shifts. They've never quite found the right fit in personalities and people who wanted to play in the band, and they kind of feel like they've sorted out a pretty solid trio for this record. It's all completely different except for the front woman and guitarist, who essentially drives the ship here. And we'll get to a song here just to show, I guess, how much things have changed since the last album. If you're familiar with Dominion, which was a more straightforward, kind of Morbid Angel influenced record, which focused on just the early 90s sound of death metal with a little bit of the 80s touch to it. So this is something a bit different, but also familiar to anyone who knows that album. So while the previous album was definitely split between its love for the formation of death metal in Florida and the sort of primal 80s thrashing side of it, as well as the evolution towards, records beyond Altars of Madness, this definitely pulls into a progressive death metal touch, and I would say the old school progressive death metal side of things. Still thrashing, still has some sadist in there, certainly has the energy of Atheist on a lot of these songs, and it has an uglier guitar tone. If you remember Blood Oath's record from just a couple years ago, it had a very raw sound. It had that early Florida death metal touch to it, and it had a little bit of extra bass guitar in there that kind of made it gives it that early progressive death metal edge you'd find beyond, I guess, Human era Death. And that's kind of where I would place this record. It definitely has more of a raw sound. It definitely focuses on a couple of extraneous movements and a couple of ranting sort of song types. But for the most part, if you're a fan of Death, the band, you're going to appreciate the sound of this band. And for some people, that's kind of old hat. It's something that you're used to hearing, and you've heard probably a lot more of it in the early 2010s. And that kind of wore itself out at some point for a lot of people. But for me, it's a good font to sort of start and find a place where a band can change in terms of death metal. And there's still plenty of thrash metal on this record, and it's just buried in that more ornate movement. So you'll find that if you focus on the riffs, you'll find that there's death thrash and a little bit more of an immediacy between a lot of these movements, which are rooted in that 80s style. So there's a little bit of everything on this EP. It's tucked in there pretty neatly. There's a lot of more technical touches here, but it is still very much straightforward death metal with a little bit of more of a flow and nuance to it. In a way, it's kind of revisionist death metal. It puts a different energy into it. It touches upon some different types of movements and odd timing here and there, just a little bit. But overall, I think my biggest criticism of this record is it could use a bit more leads. There's some really good ones on here, and there's some just okay ones. Kind of what I call fretboard scrambling, where there's certainly a shape there, but it's more about conveying energy than it is about hooking into the song in most cases. So there's more work to be done in that. I think the big note here is that this is kind of a reset for the band. It's something pretty distinctly different, but still in that wheelhouse. So if you're a fan of Cemetery Filth already, this fits, and it sounds like Cemetery Filth. They've certainly undergone a very large change over time, and it's not just the lineup, but also the focus on the style they're taking on here. I hope this is a primer for bigger things because I like this direction. I think it fits the band, and as much as I love the style of Dominion, I'm just as interested in this approach. So it's a good medium, it's a good step in between, and it's a pretty substantial CD, worth checking out. I would recommend it. I give it a high recommendation. This is an above average death metal record that comes from, I think, a genuine place of passion for death metal and not just, participating. So check it out for yourself. It released on August 16th. And go ahead and read my review for more of my thoughts.